this episode of the Neutral Wisdom Podcast, Satanic Warlock Robert Shirley discusses tarot and divination and is joined by Church of Satan Reverend Dr. Clarke for professional input on this topic, including a live tarot card reading. You are listening to the Neutral Wisdom Podcast, a podcast dedicated to passing on knowledge and experience from a satanic perspective, hosted by Satanic Warlock Robert Shirley.
Greetings and welcome to the Neutral Wisdom Podcast. I'm your host, Satanic Warlock Robert Shirley, and in today's episode, we'll be discussing tarot card readings and divination in general. Where does the Satanist stand with regard to fortune telling? Where does the insight and the messaging come from? I'm very pleased to have Church of Satan Reverend and tarot card reader Dr. Clarke join me later for this discussion. Reverend Dr. Clarke has also graciously agreed to giving me a live tarot card reading on the air for our listeners who may have never experienced this before. You're definitely going to want to check that out. This is a subject that I have to admit I'm pretty curious about since members of my own family are into divination and card readings. While tarot seems to be the most well-known of the card reading genres, my family members actually use oracle cards for their practice. These cards differ from tarot in that they don't have a set number in the deck or structure of symbolism. In addition, I've seen that the practitioners believe that oracle card messages come from angels or spirit. As I'll read in my essay for this program, I can't discount the accuracy of these cards. I've experienced a few readings myself, and I really have yet to receive a reading that has been inaccurate. What I found interesting about tarot, or rather Satanists who read tarot, is that we as Satanists don't believe in the angels or spirit. I know there are quite a few Satanists who practice tarot card reading, as well as many who are into crystals and other forms of metaphysics. While we don't discount the supernormal, I do wonder where the Satanist sees the source of the tarot messages. So, where do the messages in a tarot reading actually come from? I provide a few theories in my essay, but I am by no means knowledgeable at all in the science or spirituality of divination. That's why Reverend Dr. Clarke is here today. I'd like to read an essay I wrote specifically for this podcast. As I said, I do not profess to answer any of my own questions, although I think I might be getting close to an answer by the end. This essay is titled, Pick a Card, Any Card. Your Future Depends on It? Sit down and I'll tell you your future. And so begins the big con of a multitude of carnival, state fair, or psychic fair hokum, where a mysterious fortune teller, most often named Madam Something or Other, entices you into a dark tent with promises of divination. What usually follows is a common application of open-ended questions, cold reading techniques, and plain old dumb luck. I see someone whose name starts with the letter R. Yes. My brother-in-law's uncle's sister's brother's cousin's former roommate's school had a janitor named Ruiz. How did you know that? The Satanists, do we actually buy what's being peddled? In an entertainment situation or to impress a date, I suppose we'd all go in with our significant other just for a larf. But would we actually put any stock in the messages given to us? Satanists are atheists, or atheists technically, and don't believe in a higher power. However, this does not mean that we also do not believe in the existence of supernormal phenomena. Note that I did not say supernatural. In his essay, Simplifying Satanic Atheism, My View, on the COS website, Magister Nemo clarifies that, additionally, Satanic atheism does not claim that supernormal powers or experiences are impossible. We do not make the common error of equating a rejection of belief in Jehovah or Allah or Big Juju with also rejecting so-called psychic phenomena, such as telepathy, precognition, clairvoyance, etc. We don't even claim to know with certainty that ghosts can't exist, for example. With that in mind, I, as a Satanist, do have to admit that there must be some stock in the reading of cards or divination. Not only are there a number of Satanists who practice or have practiced tarot card reading, but members of my own family practice oracle card reading. While I have no experience with tarot, I gotta say that the oracle cards can hit pretty close to home. The thing with card divination that I wonder about, and which serves as the topic for this article, is how does the satanic reader of tarot see the actual cards? As my experiences are with oracle cards, that's where I can actually start. Oracle cards are used for insight and spiritual guidance. They can range from simple, straightforward decks to those with intricate artwork and extensive guidebooks. Unlike traditional tarot decks, which have a fixed structure of 78 cards and specific meanings, oracle decks offer a lot more variety in terms of the number of cards in their themes. Some might focus on affirmations, other on mythological symbols or even nature imagery. My mother in law is an avid practitioner of oracle cards and uses them to give readings to various people, myself included. She believes that the angels or spirits speak to her through the cards, and the cards deliver their message to the recipient of the reading. Now, again, as a Satanist, I'm not really vibing with the whole angels and spirit thing, but if that's what my mother in law believes, who am I to question it? As I mentioned earlier, these card readings can be frighteningly accurate, at least with identifying where you are in your life or in your development. Note that I have never received a reading which told me the future. Whether that is by mom's choice or it is not the intention of oracle cards is not for me to say. All I know is I get what I get and what I don't get. So, where does this messaging come from? I don't know. I don't pretend to know. All I do know is mom believes she's helping people, and people really seem to feel comforted after one of her sessions. Tarot, on the other hand, is way out of my wheelhouse. I've noticed that most Satanists who practice card divination do seem to be tarot readers. From what I was able to find in my research on tarot mainly covers the emotions and why we do things, motivations, psychological reasoning, and feelings, moods. The art of tarot reading has ancient roots in divination. It is the most common fortune telling tool out there. So, if my mother in law believes in angels and spirit to provide messages in card readings, where do the messages in tarot come from? Does the Satanist believe that the divination of cards is supernormal, supernatural? Is it a transfer of energy into the deck with manifestation of intent? Is the interpretation of a card up to the individual who pulls it? Or does the tarot reader give the interpretation? As I said, I don't claim to know how these things work. However, since we have members of the COS, some high profile, who have done this, and since I myself have had experiences with the process, it cannot be discounted. Maybe it's all up to you, the person receiving the reading, to determine how accurate it is and how much validity there is to it. Maybe the source of the messages is not as important as what you take away from the reading. Damn it. I think I might have just answered my own question. Would I still go in and see the Carney card reader? Would I go in expecting a life altering experience? Would I attribute my future to a random selection of playing cards in a dimly lit tent in the middle of a parking lot full of carnival rides? You'll tell me my future? Well, go ahead. Impress me. Let's pause here. When we come back, we welcome Church of Satan Reverend Dr. Dylan Clarke for his insight on today's topic and a personal tarot card reading for myself. Stick around.
You are listening to the Neutral Wisdom Podcast. For comments, questions, or suggestions, email information@neutralwisdom.ca.
Handmade, all-natural, botanical perfumes, soaps, and ceremonial incense, sculptures and jewelry to adorn yourself and your other altars. All this and more await you at moonandsunemporium.com. Ritual perfumes and other occult fine art luxuries, created and curated by me, Priestess Sarah Josephine Clarke, with tarot readings by Reverend Dr. Dylan Clarke. moonandsunemporium.com.
And we are back with the Neutral Wisdom Podcast. I'd like to welcome our special guest for more discussion on today's topic and major education for me, I'm sure. He's a reverend in the Church of Satan, a tattoo aficionado, accomplished tarot card reader, and apparently a champion sharpshooter. So you better believe I'll be minding my P's and Q's today. Welcome to the podcast, Reverend Dr. Dylan Clarke. Dylan, it's so great to have you here. Thanks for being here today.
It's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Just for those listeners who might be unfamiliar with you, if you could just give us a little bit of a background, tell us about yourself. How did you come to be a Satanist? Just the here's Dylan type of information would be great.
Right. I'll preface this by saying I'm going to talk a little bit more than I usually would in this about my scientific background, specifically because we're going to be discussing tarot and it'll become relevant later. I was born in the northeast of England. I now live in Kentucky with my wife, Sarah, who's a priestess in the Church of Satan. We're in an Edwardian house that we bought and we've mostly restored. We're still restoring. So I grew up in the northeast of England. was born in 1980, so working class family. My parents, despite not having much money, saw like the computer revolution was coming and they saw it as a good thing. So my father saved up and worked a lot of overtime and got me my first computer when I was 4 years old. Really, I remember learning to read better so I could type in listings from magazines better. That's how much I've been in the tech world all my life. Along the way, I discovered the Satanic Bible. I think I actually read it when I was 16, but I was aware that it existed, but it was hard for me to get hold of younger than that. I remember buying it out of money I'd made. First of all, from about the age of 12, I delivered newspapers to make money. And then some of that, along with a small amount of money from my father, we invested in a good printer to go with the computer equipment we had at the time and started, mainly me and my brother, designing business cards and letterheads for local businesses. I remember being photographed for the local newspaper at the age of 15 in my school uniform because the head teacher about so young boys who have their own business. So I had some money from that, and I got really into reading about, in some ways, the occult, but maybe more like where the occult interfaced with self-help and self-improvement. I remember reading Robert Anton Wilson a lot, but the thing that turned me off with him was the emphasis on drugs. Like he saw things like LSD as very powerful in self-change, whereas what I found interesting in his work was that when he talked about magic and when he talked about how the brain works, both of those things really fascinated me. And I'd heard online of the Satanic Bible, ordered a copy from the local bookshop. I think it took 6 weeks to arrive at that time in England. And I would go in every week and ask them, is it in yet? And get funny looks sometimes from friends who were with me. Eventually got a copy, read it in one night, and was pretty much sure I wanted to join the Church of Satan. But at that point, I'm 16 years old, so I can't. I'm vaguely aware of the organization online. Then the year later, I heard from a friend who'd seen it in the newspaper that Dr. LaVey had died, which was kind of made me wish I could have joined earlier with him still having been there, but prior to that. Anyway, time goes on. I went to university, was studying my first degree, which was an M-Math, which it's a British degree where essentially you do a bachelor's degree and then a master's degree in mathematics as one degree all the way through. Partway through that, I joined the Church of Satan, I think at the age of probably 21 or 22. And finished that degree, was kind of not hugely involved in Satanism. I mean, I was on some of the old message boards, but mainly I was just a member because the philosophy resonated with me. And then I went off when I finished university. I briefly considered being a mathematics teacher, but decided against that and went into computer programming, having programmed my entire life anyway. While I was doing that, I got really interested in hypnosis and NLP. I also picked up the basics of tarot card reading. In fact, I picked them up a little bit earlier when I was first at university, but I'll go to that more later. Started studying hypnosis and NLP. My initial teachers in NLP were Fran Burgess and Derek Jackson, who were brilliant, but I studied with a lot of the big names over the years. Became like a profitable hobby. I was working with people in all sorts of contexts, and it was helping my career. Then at the age of 27, I decided I'd gone as far as I could in programming in the job I was in, and I wanted to go and like learn it a bit more formally. So I went back to university, got funding to do another master's degree, this time in advanced computer science. And off the back of that, got accepted for a place as a research assistant with a PhD attached. Did my PhD in computer science, specializing in distributed systems and intrusion tolerance. Then went on to be a university researcher in, well, initially it was cybersecurity, but I went more into the electronic voting area for a while before eventually leaving that and going into private industry. So I've had a huge background in the hard sciences over my life, and that's influenced a lot that I've done. Then At a Church of Satan event, I met Sarah. We got married, and she was in Kentucky at the time. We had to choose between Kentucky and England. Decided that Kentucky suited us both better, so I ended up here.
Oh, so you came to North America for the girl, did you?
Yes, I did.
It was a good choice. We're happy to have you on this side of the pond, that's for sure. So you touched on your interest in tarot when you were in school and kind of taking the sciences. And how did you actually become to be a reader? Were you always drawn to the metaphysical aspects of life, or was there actually something in Satanism that resonated with you that kind of drew you to tarot?
I would say it was a bit of both. When I was fairly young, probably about 11 years old, I found in our attic a copy of the book The Black Arts by Richard Cavendish, which is on, I think it's on the reading list for the Satanic Witch, if I remember correctly.
It
Uh,
is, yes.
read that, and it fascinated me the way that that book kind of talks about, there's a lot about magic in a way of like the human mind and changing your own mind, but it also has a lot of just generally the history, witchcraft, divination, the Kabbalah, things like that. And I loved this idea both of sort of hidden wisdom that you could study, but also the idea of unlocking parts of your own mind. So that stayed with me a long time. Then when I was, say, I think it was I was around 18 years old, I just happened to get hold of a deck of tarot cards. I think I saw them in a shop and just, oh, those look interesting, and got and decided to learn from the booklet to read them. Started reading for people on and off and reading for myself. Did bits with it. Didn't do a lot, but just kind of had fun with it and knew how to do it. I also knew a little bit of pendulum dowsing because that was an interest of my mother's, and she very much saw that as it's the human mind. And she just taught me at a young age, if you lose something in the house, just draw a little plan of the rooms on a piece of paper, get something like a ring on a cord, hold it over it, and it'll start spinning one way when you're over the place where it is. And I got to be able to do that reliably. She always could, but it was always explained that it's your subconscious mind doing it. There was never anything magical about it. It was, I know she also said, well, people use this to find water as well. Not something she did, but her belief with that was it was something to do probably with magnetic fields or sense of smell or something like that. So I had this exposure to divination, but not in a magical sense. Anyway, so I learned tarot, did a bit with it while I was at university, kind of forgot about it. Then in the NLP days early on, there was a few people interested in tarot cards. We did a little bit with reading, used some of the skills that we developed there in with it, but very much just saw it as a fun thing to do. Then I didn't do a lot with it until I came to Kentucky. And Sarah and I had a physical store for a while. And a friend who was very interested in when he heard that I could read tarot cards, he bought me a tarot deck and said, I'll give you this in return for a reading. So I did him his first reading in the store. Then we started occasionally offering readings just for for people who were friends. We weren't charging for it. And then after a little bit, we decided to add it on to the things we were offering when we were vending.
That's how I came across you as a tarot reader, was by the ad that Sarah has put out on the Satan's Blame podcast and now on my podcast. And I thought, well, there's something to this because, as I mentioned in my essay, my family has been more into the oracle cards and the stones, the crystals, the gemstones. I've played with the pendulums myself. You kind of hold it over your palm and kind of command it which way to go. And for some weird reason, it does. I could never explain it. I just thought it was kind of neat. So you're still doing tarot readings now. That's it, though, as far as metaphysical divinity type stuff. No other work with crystals or anything. You're just sticking with the cards?
I don't really do anything much with other people with other things, but we do crystals is one of the things that we sell. We'll have some particularly nice ones that we've curated. Now I do myself. I don't really do divination with gemstones, but I'll often have some nice crystals around. And to me, I don't necessarily disbelieve in the properties people give to them, but I also don't believe in them. I'm very neutral to it, but I find, if I'm in a meeting or something, just having nice gemstones that look nice and feel nice to handle around is often a positive thing, especially if I'm dealing with a stressful situation or something where I need a lot of creativity.
It's true. And I know a lot of people say that they derive different energies or different inspirations from different crystals. So the rose quartz is to make you feel the lapis lazuli is supposed to open your third eye, those kind of attributes that they give to those stones. And I think it's a personal kind of comforting. If you slip one of those rocks in your pocket and you're a little bit nervous, if you can reach for something, some kind of a talisman that sets you at ease, there's got to be something to that, right?
Yeah. Something else, I teach some meditation classes and do guided meditation work with people. And something I learned early on from a mentor that I like to do occasionally to help people to shift belief systems is teach a class and use some like very traditional mystical thing that they'll have heard of, like, for example, chakra meditations or something like that, and deliberately get all the associations wrong, get them to get the effect, and then tell them at the end that we did it all wrong and it still worked. And I find that's a good way to get people to see the power in their own mind.
So one of the things I was asking you, and I had sent you the questions ahead of time, with regard to the essay that I read at the top of the program, the oracle cards and the messaging that my mother-in-law attributes to the oracle cards, she listens to her angels or to spirit. Where do you think that the messaging in tarot comes from? And what I find interesting is you work this in association with NLP. So is there anything to do with cold reading when you're doing tarot? Is there a true message when it comes from tarot? And if you think there is, where do you think that it comes from? Is it spiritual? Is it logic? Is it subconscious?
So this is going to be a two-part answer, and I'll start off. The first part is why I brought up my science background. That part of me says if it works, I don't need to know why it works, that I can be purely empirical with it. And I'm very big on multiple models for things. So to like draw this out a bit further, I would give, like, first of all, a very contrived example. I know I don't believe the earth is flat. I'm pretty sure you don't believe the earth is flat, and pretty much nobody who's listening believes the earth is flat. However, say we were planning a trip from, say, Kentucky to New York. When we look at the map, we might, use a ruler to measure distance, at least before Google Maps, or we might use a piece of string round them. And everything we're doing in measuring that distance, we're working as if the earth is flat. So that model of a flat earth that we don't believe to be true still works perfectly well for us measuring that distance. To go even further and less contrived, say, for example, I was to drop a cannonball off the roof of my house and I want to know how fast it'll hit the ground. Well, the standard way of doing that would be to say use Newtonian mechanics and say, well, the force acting on the cannonball is equal to the mass of the cannonball multiplied by the gravitational constant. And so that's moving something with that mass at that speed directly downwards. So we know it's accelerating at a number of meters per second equal to the gravitational constant. But we know from Einstein's general relativity that isn't really what's happening, but it's a really, really good model for it. We might even want to sometimes go with a simpler model that says, my house is relatively small in like universal scale, and a cannonball's heavy and small. So if I drop it off the roof, it hits the ground straight away. An even simpler model. So I very much have that there might be multiple models of why something works. And if you know it works, for all practical purposes, it might not matter at all what the real reason is. So I work with a lot of things with that viewpoint. And also in with it sometimes that I may try and temporarily suspend disbelief and believe in a model that my client believes in that I don't normally. If I'm working with someone who really feels that messages come from angels, they may get messages from angels, unless it's negative for them to have that and that the belief needs breaking. So that's the first part of the answer. The second part is, what do I think is my best guess at what is going on? I would say I think it's probably a combination of some cold reading I'm doing subconsciously, because I've trained in a lot of things like that over the years with NLP, but I know I am not consciously sitting down and using them when I read tarot from someone. But that doesn't mean that I'm not doing them without realizing. And mixed with the imagery on the tarot cards, I believe, is drawing a lot out of the other person's subconscious. I think it's my intuition mixed with their intuition and the interplay of both of us. And that's one reason why I love reading face to face. On the other hand, I do a lot of readings via email as well, and people get a lot out of them. But then you could argue that is like it's the interplay of their subconscious when they read what I wrote with what my intuition told me, and that what when they read what I've said, the way they interpret it may not be quite the way I meant it, but it may be more useful for them because they know their situation. However, having said all of that, I would not totally discount the possibility that there isn't some sort of telepathy, whatever mechanism it is, whether it's some sort of quantum interchange or whether it's something that we do through body language or through sense of smell below the subconscious or whatever, or a combination of all of these things. So that's my best guess, but I'm not a researcher who's figured it out.
No. It's a very pragmatic approach to it. Like I say, you are going to take away from it what you will take away from it, wherever that's based in, wherever that comes from. And I kind of see you as a guide to getting that message to that person for them to interpret. So responsibility to the responsible if we have to get technical with it, right?
Yeah.
So as we discussed before, for our listeners who may have never experienced a tarot reading, and for me, who has never actually experienced a tarot reading because my experience is with the oracle cards, you've agreed to graciously do a reading for me during this podcast so that people can hear what it's like and give an idea if they were to contact you, what they could expect. And from this point on, I'm throwing it to you. Whatever you need me to do, just let me know. But this is all you from here, sir.
Right. So normally when I read for somebody, say via email, I would give them a 9-card reading. In person, I will often do more. However, for the purposes of things being relatively quick on this podcast, I'm going to do a 3-card reading for you. To begin with, do you have a theme or a question that you'd like the reading to be around?
Not overly. I didn't come into it prepared with anything specific. I'm interested in seeing what the cards have to say. As I say, with the oracle cards, they are a indicator of where you are currently. So I never usually go in with any questions, and that's kind of how I'm approaching this. So
that's a perfectly valid way for us to do tarot. So I will take 3 cards for you here. So first card we get is the Page of Cups reversed. Now, the Page of Cups can represent a young emotional person. It can also represent a message or a messenger. Reversed usually means it's something that's not fully arrived yet or is on the way of going out, or some sort of dilution or reversal of the message. So I would take the Page of Cups reversed in this context to be talking about the fact that you're trying to learn in this podcast more about how the tarot works, and that you're starting to get some of the message from how we've looked at things, but there's still more to come as we go on. Now,
okay, yeah, that's fair.
We have is the Three of Pentacles reversed again. And the Three of Pentacles is a card of hard work. It's of artifice, building things, and again reverse. That seems to strengthen what we've already got there, that you're building this structure, maybe both in this podcast around tarot and over the podcasts you're making as a whole, that you're building this thing that brings this message and this wisdom, but it's reversed because you haven't been podcasting for many years. You haven't finished it. You still got a lot to go, even as it's building up now. And finally, we get the Eight of Pentacles right way up. And that is a card of craftsmanship and of receiving the fruits of your labors. It's very much getting the results of the work that you've put in. And here I would say that this, again, in the context of us talking in the podcast, it says that you've put a lot of effort into what you do, the way that you present things, the way you produce things, choosing topics, and that right now, even though it's very much a work in progress and you're building up, you were already starting to get the things that you wanted to get from it in proportion to all the work that you've put into it.
Wow. Listeners, this guy's bang on. It's very nice to hear that kind of thing. It's a little bit of a reinforcement. It's a little bit of encouragement. It's very inspirational. And I am going to ask Dylan to give us his information at the end because, wow, that's amazing. I cannot thank you enough for that. It was quite the experience. Considering this is the first time that we've met and we're just looking at each other basically on computer cameras, you hit really close to home. Wow. I always kind of go into these things with all right, buddy, impress me. And yeah, okay, consider me suitably impressed. Wow, thank you so much for that. I can only imagine if a 3-card reading hits that hard, a 9-card reading must be absolutely incredible. I might get a hold of you off the air to keep this going. With regards to anything else on this topic, is there anything you would like our listeners to know in addition to what we've already talked about? Do you have any advice, any tips if somebody wants to get into tarot? And again, most importantly, where can our listeners find you? Where can they get hold of you? How can they contact you for their own readings? The floor is yours, sir. Please, whatever you have is great.
I'll start with, so I don't forget this, where they can contact me, moonandsunemporium.com. I do online readings from there. We also list events where anyone who's, usually they're in Kentucky, anyone who's local can come along. And when we have events, it'll list whether I'm reading at that one or not, because sometimes we're just selling. Sometimes I'm reading as well. I've got a standard on the website, email-based readings, but I do also do from time to time ones, via Zoom or other messengers with people. I'll probably be setting more up with that.
Okay. And is there any tips or advice for someone who thinks they might want to read tarot cards as well?
I would say some of it is learn the very basics. Either get a good book, and by good I mean something that briefly covers the meanings of them but has a bit of advice on how to read, or just read the booklet that comes with your favorite deck and then start doing it. There's definitely different styles of how people read. And I would say to most people, find your own, don't get drawn too much into other people's. And this is personal bias, but I like collaborative readings with people, and I like to look at things as like problem solving. Some people, and you can learn from people like this, like to very much talk about outside forces that are holding people down and either bring a lot of doom and gloom in or predict things that will happen with no effort. I think that's artificial and it's a bad way to use the cards. Because, like, I would say my view is on it, like, let's assume, and I don't believe this, but let's assume that suddenly we found out that actually the cards are totally magical and there's angels or demons or something telling you exactly what is going to happen next. Even if that was true, which I don't think it is, and I read the cards for someone and it said, tomorrow, it suddenly became so specific, you'll get your foot run over by a car and it'll have to be amputated. My style of reading would be, so what we need to figure out from the cards and through collaborating each other is what you're going to do to keep your life good after your foot's been amputated. Whereas a lot of people will get the most vague card reading and they will turn it round into, there are dark forces against you. You must learn my school of how to keep yourself safe from them, or buy this amulet from me, or something like that. I would advise, but avoid people like that unless you want to become a bad news amulet salesman. If you want to do that, that's okay, but there's probably other things you could make more money selling.
So we shouldn't trust necessarily the tarot card reader in the stinky tent at the fair, is what you're saying.
No. I would say very much, if you're picking a reader to read for you, see how, if you talk to them for a few minutes, see whether you get on with them. See if they feel like the sort of person you'd be happy to have a beer with. Or if you're looking for some extra, are they the sort of person who you'd be uncomfortable around because they tell you too much truth? In some cases, you might want that person to read for you.
I cannot thank you enough, Dylan, for being on the podcast today. Again, thank you so much. And I think that's going to wrap it up for this episode of the Neutral Wisdom Podcast. Thanks to everybody for listening. And please make sure to check out Reverend Dr. Dylan Clarke at moonandsunemporium.com. Please drop a like or comment down below. For questions or comments, you can email me directly at information@neutralwisdom.ca. You can listen to us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Google, and all the usual places you get your podcasts. Check me out on Facebook under Robert Shirley and Instagram at neutral_wisdom. And be sure to check out the website at www.neutralwisdom.ca. Until next time, ever forward.
You have been listening to the Neutral Wisdom Podcast. For more information, email us at information.neutralwisdom.ca, Facebook under Robert Shirley, or Instagram at neutral_wisdom. Also, check out the website at neutralwisdom.ca. Program copyright 2024 Devilish Gentleman Enterprises.